There's a moment in every person's life that comes quietly, almost unnoticed, until it crashes through like a wave you didn't see coming. It's the moment where everything falls apart. The plans you carefully built, crushed. The identity you've clung to for safety, shaken. The strength you were so sure you had, gone. And all that remains is the true thing: you are broke. But I want you to know something that most people won't say out loud. Breaking isn't failure. It's not weakness. Breaking is the beginning. We are taught to be strong, polished, flawless. We armor ourselves with perfection, pretending we've got it all figured out. But life doesn't ask for our perfection. It demands our presence. It calls for our courage. And it begins the transformation not with glory, but with the crack. Main body, story-driven, vulnerable, empowering. You will break. Maybe not today. Maybe not in front of anyone else. But it will happen. A betrayal, a diagnosis, a loss, a disappointment so deep that it echoes through your bones. And in that moment, the world tells you to toughen up, push through, numb it, hide it, pretending it didn't shake you. But I want to invite you to feel it. Not because suffering is noble, but because denying your pain is what keeps you small. Pain is not the enemy. Numbness is, shame is, disconnection is. We are taught from an early age to associate success with control, with strength, with being composed in the face of adversity. We're told to stay strong, to push through, to never show weakness, to never let others see us sweat or struggle. Somewhere along the way, we start to believe that breaking means failure, that if life brings us to our knees, it means we've done something wrong. We fear the breaking, avoid at all costs, and wrap ourselves in layers of business, perfectionism, and distraction just to keep the cracks from showing. But life has a way of showing us that no matter how tightly we try to hold everything together, eventually the weight becomes too much and we break. Not because we are weak, because we are human. That moment, the one we dread and try to outrun, is not a sign that everything is over. It's not the collapse of who we are. It's the beginning of something much deeper, something more truthful, something more alive. Because in the breaking, there is a shedding, a surrender, a powerful and painful release of all the illusions we've been clinging to. When life strips away your carefully built identity, your neatly constructed plans, and your instructions about what your story was supposed to look like, it leaves you raw and exposed. And in that rawness, there is a strange kind of purity. There is a truth that you couldn't see where we're hiding behind the armor. The breaking feels like loss. And in many ways it is. You lose certainty. You lose your stability. You might lose relationships, goals, jobs, versions of yourself you thought were permanent. But beneath the grief is the seed of something else entirely. Something that couldn't take root in the hard soil of control and performance. There is clarity. There is self-awareness. There is the beginning of becoming. You begin to see, maybe for the first time, what is real and what is just noise. What matters and what never truly did. What you've been carrying that was never yours to hold. And who you are without the masks you didn't even know you were wearing. There is a moment in the breaking that brings face to face with yourself. Not the curated, polished version you show the world, but the unfiltered, unprotected, honest self that exists underneath. And that moment is terrifying. It feels like standing in front of a mirror with no place to hide. You see the parts of yourself you've buried, denied, ignored. You feel the weight of your own pain, the ache of unmet needs, the silence of dreams you stopped believing in. But you also see something else, something quietly powerful. You see your resilience. You see your capacity to endure. You see the flicker of a will that refuses to disappear, even when everything else has. Most people don't want to go there. Most people want the rise without the fall. They want transformation without the bleeding. But that's not how it works. Growth doesn't come in the moments of ease. It comes in the fire. In the tears you cry alone at night. In the mornings you don't want to get out of but do it anyway. In the silence that follows the storm when you finally realize no one else is coming to save you. And that maybe, just maybe, you don't need saving. Maybe you just need space to feel it all, to grieve what was, and to slowly step into what's next. There is beauty in the breaking, but not the kind of beauty that's easily shared in filtered photos or neat quotes. It's a beauty that is born from ashes, from surrender, from reckoning. It's the beauty of knowing you have faced off and survived, that your world has fallen apart and somehow you're still here. Maybe not whole, maybe not ready, but present. Still breathing, still reaching for something more. The world around you might not understand your breaking. People might try to fix you, rush you, encourage you to move on before you're ready. But you owe it to yourself to honor what's happening inside you, to give space to the pain, the confusion, the questions, to stop pretending, to stop apologizing for being exactly where you are, because where you are, right in the middle of the mess, is sacred. It's the place where the old you begins to dissolve and the real you starts to emerge. Not a better version, not a more successful or more polished version, but a truer one. A version that isn't performing for approval or hustling for worth. A version that knows what it means to break, what it means to build again from the ground up. In that space, something begins to shift. You stop chasing certainty and start learning how to sit with the unknown. You stop needing to prove yourself and start accepting yourself. You start to understand that breaking was never the end of you. It was the unraveling of all the things that were never really you to begin with. We live in a culture that rewards masks. The mask of strength, the mask of perfection, the mask of confidence. From the outside, people might think you have it all figured out. You're functioning, performing, succeeding, even when inside you're unraveling. Somewhere along the way, we learned that showing emotion is dangerous. That to cry, to shake, to say, I don't know how to do this, is a sign that you're failing, that vulnerability is weakness. So we build walls instead of bridges. We smile when we want to scream. We say, I'm fine, when we're barely breathing. We armor up because we think the world can't be trusted with our softness. But here's the truth. What we've been taught, vulnerability, is not only wrong, it's deeply damaging. Because the very thing we're afraid of showing is what actually sets us free. Vulnerability isn't falling apart in chaos. It's choosing to be real when every instinct tells you to shut down. It's having the courage to say, I'm struggling. When you've been praised for always keeping it together, it's letting people see the parts of you that aren't polished or proud. Vulnerability is what happens when you stop performing and start telling the truth. And that truth, while scary, is also where strength begins. Real strength isn't built in the absence of pain. It's built in the willingness to face it. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you're not inviting pity. You're inviting connection. You're saying, this is me. Not the curated version, not the filtered version, but the real, breathing, imperfect me. And in doing so, you open the door for others to do the same. Vulnerability is how we remember that we're not alone. It's how we bridge the gap between isolation and belonging. Because behind every smile is a story. Behind every success is a struggle. And when we stop pretending that we are immune to pain, we create space for healing. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. There's a kind of bravery in admitting that you're not okay. It goes against everything we've been taught about composure and control. It requires standing in front of others with your heart open and your defenses down. It's not easy. You risk being judged, misunderstood, even rejected. But you also risk being seen, and being seen, truly seen, is one of the most powerful experiences a person can have. It says, I'm still worthy, even in this mess. Vulnerability is not that oversharing or dramatizing. It's about being honest, especially when honesty feels like the hardest thing to offer. We think we have to wait until we figure everything out before we can speak our truth. We tell ourselves, I'll open up when I'm stronger. I'll share when I've healed. I'll be honest when I've got it under control. But healing doesn't happen in hiding. It happens in the light. And sometimes the most healing you do is to admit that you're still in the middle of it, that you're still finding your way, that you're not a finished product, but a human in process. You don't need to have all the answers to be worthy of connection. You don't need to be completely healed to show up with your heart. In fact, it's your willingness to show up as you are that becomes the doorway to the healing you're looking for. There is profound power in saying, this is hard, or I need help, I'm scared. Those words are not weakness. They are the language of courage. And every time you choose truth over performance, you build a life that can hold your full identity, not just the curated highlights. There is a quiet strength and vulnerability that people often overlook. It's not loud. It's not flashy, but it's deep and steady. It's the kind of strength that lets you face the storm without pretending it doesn't exist. It's the strength that says, I'm still here, even when your world has been turned upside down. Vulnerability doesn't guarantee a pain-free life, but it does guarantee a more honest one. And with honesty comes freedom. Freedom from the pressure to be perfect. Freedom from the fear of not being enough. Freedom from the exhausting effort of holding it all in. When you live vulnerably, you begin to recognize that your story, exactly as it is worthy. You start to value depth over appearance. You stop measuring your life by how much of avoided discomfort and start measuring it by how willing you've been to feel it. To be vulnerable is to live without the constant need for approval. It's choosing your truth over your image. In a world obsessed with appearances, that is an act of rebellion. So many people spend their lives avoiding vulnerability, thinking it will keep them safe. But safety without authenticity is just another kind of prison. The goal is not to be untouchable. It's to be a real, to be soft you and strong, to be hurting you and hopeful, to be in certain and still brave enough to take the next step. Vulnerability is not a liability. It's the birthplace of every meaningful thing we long for: love, connection, joy, purpose, and belonging. And when we choose to live from that place, if it scares us, even if it makes us feel exposed, we begin to build a life rooted not in fear, but in truth. Pain is something we're taught to avoid all costs. From childhood, we are given signals that pain should be hidden, numbed, denied, or disguised behind a forced smile or a clever distraction. We grow up believing that discomfort is something to be pushed aside in pursuit of happiness, success, and peace. We label pain as a mistake, as punishment, as something gone terribly wrong. But pain is not here to destroy you. It's not a personal attack on your life. Pain is a messenger, a guide, a teacher with lessons that cannot be taught through ease or comfort. It enters when something needs to be seen. It stays until something is acknowledged. And only when we learn to listen to it rather than run from it Does it begin to reveal what it came to show us? Pain comes in many forms. Loss, betrayal, illness, disappointment, heartbreak, rejection. Sometimes it arrives suddenly like a storm you didn't see coming. Sometimes it builds slowly, quietly, over time, becoming a dull ache you eventually stop noticing until one day it roars loud enough that you can't ignore it anymore. But however it shows up, pain always demands attention. It refuses to be bypassed. And the longer we resist it, the louder and more disruptive it becomes. Because pain isn't just something to get through. It's something to understand. Beneath the sting, there is information. Beneath the H is a message. Pain tells you what matters to you. It highlights your values, your boundaries, your longings, your deepest fears. It tells you when something isn't working. It shows you the gap between what you're doing and who you truly are. It forces you to stop, to reflect, to ask the hard questions. It strips away the noise and leaves only what is essential. When you allow yourself to feel it, to really feel it, you begin to uncover the truths you've buried beneath the surface of your busy life. We spend so much time trying to escape pain that we rarely pause to ask what it's trying to teach us. When your heart breaks, it's easy to get caught in self-blame or bitterness. But heartbreak, painful as it is, reveals your capacity to love deeply. When failure knocks off your path, it's tempting to feel ashamed. But failure teaches you about courage, about creativity, about resilience. It forces you to stretch, to grow, to pivot. When grief washes over you, it can feel like drowning. But grief is evidence that you dared to care. That something or someone mattered so deeply, its absence echoes. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are alive, that you are feeling, that you are human. There's a kind of wisdom that can only be born from pain. Not the kind of knowledge you find in books or hear in advice, but the kind that lives in your bones after you've walked through the fire and survived. The kind of wisdom that doesn't flinch when others are hurting. The kind that sits in silence with someone else's suffering without rushing to fix it. Pain deepens your capacity for empathy. It softens your sharp edges. It teaches you hold space for yourself and for others. It humbles you not in a way that diminishes your worth, but in a way that makes you more grounded, more open, more aware of what truly matters. And still, pain is not romantic. It's not beautiful when you're in it. It's messy, disorienting, and often brutal. It can make you question everything. It can make you feel small, isolated, even hopeless. But the presence of pain does not mean the absence of purpose. In fact, many of the most meaningful shifts in our lives begin not with joy, but with discomfort. The unraveling comes before the rebuilding. The shedding comes before the bloom. You must sit in the dirt before the roots can deepen. And it's in that dark, uncomfortable space that something sacred begins to grow. We are so quick to want the lesson without the experience. We want the strength without the struggle, the insight without the H. But life doesn't work that way. The most transformative realizations come when you have no choice but to sit still with your own heart hatch. They come in the middle of the night when the silence is too loud to ignore. They come when you're cracked open and forced to confront parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. And in that confrontation, in that deep and painful reckoning, you find a kind of clarity that only pain can deliver. Pain is not here to break your spirit. It's here to break the illusion that you are in control of everything, that you can go through life unscathed, that emotions are meant to be avoided. Pain teaches you how to be honest. It teaches you to check in with yourself, dives you the tools to rebuild your life with intention instead of inertia. It is not your enemy. It is your invitation to evolve. The truth is, no one gets through life untouched by pain. Everyone you meet has scars, some visible, some buried deep beneath the surface. And those scars tell stories of survival, of transformation, of lessons learned the hard way. They are not signs of weakness, but of strength earned in the most authentic way possible. When you begin to understand pain as a guide, not a punishment, everything shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin to ask, what is this trying to show me? There is a quiet kind of loneliness that settles in when you're going through something difficult. It doesn't always come from being physically alone. It's the emotional isolation that arises when you begin to believe that no one else could possibly understand what you're going through. The world continues to move at its usual pace. People keep talking about ordinary things, and you find yourself sitting in a silence that no one else seems to hear. It's in this silence that shame begins to whisper its lies as that you're weak for hurting, that you're broken for not bouncing back, that everyone else has figured out something you haven't. This lie, that you're alone in the dark, is one of the most damaging beliefs we can carry, because it convinces us to stay quiet when we most need to speak. It keeps us disconnected when connection is what we need the most. Everyone faces moments of darkness. Everyone experiences their own version of breaking. No one is exempt from grief, fear, or failure. And yet, when we're in the midst of it ourselves, it can feel like we're the only ones struggling, like everyone else is managing life better, coping better, living more gracefully. But comparison is a distortion. What you're seeing on the surface of other people's lives is not the full picture. You don't see the sleepless nights, the panic attacks behind closed doors, the silent cries for help. People are incredibly good at hiding their pain, especially in a society that celebrates composure over honesty. And the result is a culture of quiet suffering, collective illusion that everyone is fine while inside many are barely holding it together. But the truth is, you are not the only one walking through the valley. You are not the only one who feels lost, scared, or unworthy. You are not the only one who has questioned their worth or doubted their strength. And there is profound comfort in knowing that, not because your pain is less valid, but because shared experience is what brings healing. We are wired for connection. We are meant to be witnessed, to be understood, to be held, not just in our joy, but in our struggle. It is not weakness to reach for someone when you're hurting. It is not shameful to say, I need help, or I'm not okay. These are the bravest words a person can speak. And when they are spoken, something incredible happens. The darkness begins to lift, not all at once, but enough for a light to get in. You are not alone in the dark. There are people who have walked this road before you and emerged stronger. There are people walking it beside you right now, even if you can't see them. And one day, you will be the person who offers a light to someone else still trying to find their way out. That is the quiet power of being honest about your struggle. It not only liberates you, it becomes a lifeline for someone else. We all become torchbearers for each other when we speak truthfully about where we've been. The myth of solitary strength, that we have to go it alone, that asking for help is a burden, is one of the most destructive beliefs we carry. True strength is not about enduring silently. It's about reaching for connection even when every part of you wants to retreat. It's about letting someone into your world, even if all you can say is, sit with me. I don't need advice. I just need someone to be here. That kind of connection has the power to shift something deep inside us. It reminds us that we are seen, that our presence matters, that our pain is not too much for someone else to hold. And it works in the other direction too. When someone trusts you enough to be vulnerable, to let you see their broken pieces, it's an invitation, not just to support them, but to show up as your real self too. Vulnerability begets vulnerability. Honesty creates space for more honesty. When one person opens the door to their inner world, it gives others permission to do the same. And in that shared space, healing begins. It doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from feeling less alone. In the deepest moments of darkness, when you think no one understands, remember that there are people, some you know, some you've never met, who have felt what you feel, who have walked through despair, through grief, through hopelessness, and who have made it through. Maybe they're not loud about it. Maybe they don't talk about it on social media, but they exist. And many of them are quietly cheering you on, even if they don't know your name. You are part of a human story that includes pain and beauty, failure and triumph, sorrow and joy. That story is never yours to carry alone. When someone looks at you and says, me too, it doesn't solve everything, but it creates a crack in the wall that shame built. It lets light in, it lets truth in, and it reminds you that even in your lowest place, you are still worthy of love and connection. The dark does not define you. The pain does not isolate you. And even when you can't feel it, you are surrounded by a quiet, collective strength, by people who have made it through their own nights, and by the parts of yourself that are still fighting, still hoping, still reaching. Rising is one of the most misunderstood of the human experience. When we talk about rising after a fall, people often imagine a triumphant, cinematic return, fast, clean, dramatic, worthy of applause, but that's not how it works in real life. Rising is not a single moment. It's not a burst of motivation or a sudden surge of strength. It's a slow, messy, confusing process that begins when you least feel ready and unfolds in ways you never could have predicted. It doesn't feel like strength when it's happening. It feels like uncertainty, fatigue, vulnerability, and more questions than answers. But even that mess, even in that long, winding road back to yourself, you are rising. There's this idea that once you've hit rock bottom, the only is up. But what that saying doesn't capture is how long you might sit at the bottom before you even consider moving. It doesn't talk about the weight you carry as you try to stand again. It doesn't mention the self-doubt, the fear of falling again, the grief over what was lost. It doesn't tell you about the voice inside that says, what? Why try again when you might up right back here? Rising is not a clean upward climb. It's more like crawling through the wreckage, pulling yourself up piece by piece, and sometimes having to rest in the middle at all because your soul is still tired. And that's okay. Because what matters most is not how quickly you rise. It's that you choose to rise at all. You don't need to feel ready to be Jen. In fact, most people start before they're ready. They begin because staying where they are has become more painful than trying to move forward. They begin with shaky hands, with teary eyes, with a heart still full of fear. Rising starts with a whisper, not a roar. A small thought that says, maybe I can try again. That's it. No grand gestures, no fireworks, just a decision to take one step and then another, and then maybe to rest, and then to try again. It's not linear. It's not predictable. It's not Instagrammable, but it's real. It's human. And it matters more than most people will ever know. There's a loneliness that can come with rising, especially when others only saw your fall. People may not understand the work it takes to put your life back together. They might see you smiling again and assume you've healed completely. They might praise your resilience without realizing how much it cost you. but only you know what it took to get out of bed. Only you know the inner battles you're still fighting. That's why rising isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about reclaiming your life from the inside out. It's about choosing to keep showing up, even when it would be easier to stay hidden. There will be days in your rising when you question whether you've made any progress at all. You'll look at the distance between where you are and we want to be and feel disheartened. But healing doesn't always look like forward momentum. Sometimes like standing still. Sometimes it looks like falling back a few steps. Sometimes it looks like being gentle with yourself when every voice in your head tells you to push harder. True rising is not fueled by pressure. It's fueled by self-compassion. It's built not by force, but by softness, by grace, by a deep knowing that you're allowed to go at your own pace. You'll learn that rising isn't about pretending the fall didn't happen. It's about integrating it into who you are. You don't erase the past. You carry it differently. You let it teach you, shape you, strengthen you. The fall becomes part of your foundation and not the end of your story. And that's where power is. Because you begin to see that you are capable of rebuilding, not just a life, but an identity. One that is more rooted, more authentic, more alive than the version of you that exists before everything broke. Rising will challenge every part of you. It will force you to confront the stories you've been telling yourself, the ones about not being enough, about being too broken, too late, too far gone. It will push you to rewire the way you see yourself, to replace criticism with curiosity, jumping with compassion. You'll realize that strength isn't about never falling. It's about being honest about the fall and choosing to keep going anyway. Every small act of showing up, every tear let yourself cry, every moment you let yourself rest instead of quit. Those are the moments that build a real, lasting kind of strength. What most people won't tell you is that rising often feels just as uncomfortable as falling. Growth stretches you, healing stings. Coming back to life after a long period of pain can feel strange, even scary. Joy can feel unfamiliar. Hope can feel risk-knit. Keep choosing, keep leaning into it, even if it feels awkward or undeserved. Because the more you show up for yourself in the discomfort, the more you begin to believe that you're worthy of this new chapter you're creating. And perhaps the most important part of rising is that you don't have to do it alone. You're not mean to. It's okay to lean on others. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be seen in your becoming, not just in your victories. Let people witness your process. Let them see the courage it takes to rebuild. You don't need to rise in silence. You're allowed to take up space in your healing. You're allowed to let your rising be visible, messy, and real. Every person carries a story, even if they've never spoken it out loud. Some stories are told in confident voices and on public stages, while others live in quiet corners of the soul, whispered only in journals, in late-night thoughts, or in the safety of trusted arms. But no matter how visible or hidden it is, your story holds power. Not because it's perfect, not because it has a clean arc or a happy ending, but because it's yours, authentically, painfully, beautifully yours. And when you begin to see the value of your story, not as something to be ashamed of, but as something to be honored, you take a powerful step toward healing, belonging, and becoming. We are conditioned to believe that stories are only worth sharing if they come wrapped in success or triumph. We compare our unfinished, messy chapters to someone else's polished final paragraph. We look at the chaos we've survived, the in-breaks we carry, the mistakes we've made, and we wonder if any of it is worth speaking aloud. What we don't realize is that someone, somewhere, is waiting to hear the exact story we've been hinting. Not because they need to be entertained, but because they need to know they're not alone. Because they need to see that surviving is possible. Because they need a reflection of their own struggle in someone else's courage. We live in a culture that praises strength, but misunderstands it. Real strength doesn't come from pretending you've never been hurt. It doesn't come from hiding the chapters that don't fit the narrative of success. It comes from owning every part of your journey, including the ones you'd rather forget. It comes from standing in front of your story, not behind it, and saying, this is who I am. Not despite what I've been through, but because of it. That's not weakness. That's bravery of the highest order. That's what it means to turn your life into a story worth telling, not because of what happened, but because of how you lived through it. Your scars aren't stains. They are proof that you've healed, that you've fought, that you've chosen to move forward when it would have been easier to stay stuck. And there's something powerful about choosing to share not just the victories, but the valleys too. The sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the times you broke down and questioned everything. These are not moments to hide. They are the moments that shaped you. They are the reason your voice carries weight. They're the evidence that your resilience is real. Telling your story doesn't require a stage or a spotlight. It might happen across a kitchen table, in a therapist's office, or through the pages of a handwritten letter. It might happen in a moment of eye contact, a stranger who sees your pain and silently nods in recognition. What matters is not how you tell your story, but that you allow it to be told. That you stop silencing yourself out of shame, that you stop shrinking your truth to make others comfortable. Your truth is not too much. Your past is not too messy. Your journey is not too complicated to be hard. It is real, and that makes it worthy. There's a kind of liberation that comes when you speak the parts of your story that once felt unspeakable. When you say, "This is what happened, and this is how I survived." And not as a victim, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone reclaiming ownership. Someone who has realized that what merely broke them also built them. Someone who understands that silence may have protected them once. But now, truth is the only way forward. And in sharing your story, something remarkable begins to happen, Eugen, to rewrite it. You shift from being defined by what happened to becoming the one who defines what it means. You stop being the person who was hurt and start becoming the person who healed. Your story becomes less about pain and more about power, less about what was taken from you and more about what you chose to do with what was left. And that transformation isn't just for you. It becomes a gift to the people who are still in their own darkness. When someone hears your story and says, "Me too," that's when the magic happens. That's when isolation gives way to belonging. That's when empathy becomes possible. And that's how the chain of courage begins. They speak, they heal. They speak, someone else heals. And so on, and so on. This is how collective healing begins. Not through grand gestures, but through the quiet. A brave act of telling the truth. But telling your story doesn't mean you owe it to everyone. You get to choose when, how, and with whom you share. You get to protect what's sacred and reveal what's ready. You get to speak from your scars, not your words, when the time is right for you. And in doing so, you reinforce the truth that you are in control of your own narrative, that no one else gets to define it, minimize it, or rewrite it. Your voice is your own. Your truth is your own. And when you honor it, others learn to honor theirs too. Your story is not a burden. It is not a weakness. It is not something to be hidden in the shows. It is a light, a mirror, a path, a legacy. It is proof that you have lived, that you have felt deeply, that you have walked through the fire and are still here. And sometimes just being here is the most powerful part of the story.